Welcome back guys to GTA 6 Explained, and in today's video I'm going to be going over the noise this week around GTA 6 and whether we are going to be getting a physical disc or not, because the back and forth on this has gotten kind of crazy. So let's get straight into it. So pretty much Rockstar's official stance is as blunt as it gets, and it is that there are no plans for a GTA 6 disc to be printed, not at launch and not months down the line either. So that is about as clear a statement as you can get. However, the internet somehow keeps finding ways to convince itself otherwise. Posts keep circulating claiming insider info or leaked screenshots proving a real physical version is coming, and every time it falls apart under any kind of scrutiny. And let's also talk about the retailer pushback first, because this part is genuinely interesting. So Video Games Plus, which has been around for like 30 years and is one of the last physical game retail chains still standing in North America, put out a public statement basically refusing to play along, and their policy is they will not carry a product they will not carry a product that's just a download code stuffed inside a box. They're calling that a fake physical release, and a lot of longtime collectors agree with them. For people who grew up buying games on shelves, a code in a case doesn't feel like ownership. It feels like a workaround designed to dodge criticism while still claiming there's a physical option. And pretty much now, here's where it gets messy. A while back, there was a Best Buy leak claiming a real physical copy was coming, with pre-orders supposedly going live back in May. That story spread like wildfire across gaming media outlets, and basically nobody bothered to actually check the source before running with it. And turns out that source got banned from the official GTA forums for spreading false claims. So that whole leak was pretty much dead on arrival, but the damage was already done because people had already convinced themselves it was true. So then more recently, we got another round of hope thanks to a screenshot of an email from what's labeled Rockstar support. And the email said something along the lines of current pre-orders are digital only, but you'll only be able to get a physical copy, you'll be able to get a physical copy in the following months, which does sound promising on the surface. But if you do think about it for a second, Rockstar support is not some insider channel with access to confidential release strategy. That's almost certainly a low-level support rep or even a chatbot working off a generic script, and it's definitely not someone who has inside scoop on what Take-Two and Rockstar are actually planning. So the outlet seems to actually have real access, or the only outlet that seems to have like real access is the Hollywood Reporter. And they've had legitimate exclusive access to Rockstar before, going back to 2018 when they sat down with members of the art team during Red Dead Redemption 2's lead up, and again more recently when they broke the news about GTA 6's trailer hitting something like 475 million views in a single day. So when they publish something, it does tend to carry more weight than your average leak account, and their report is they laid out their report pretty clearly. Pretty much, the so-called physical version of GTA 6 is just a download code packed into a physical case, and that's pretty much it. It's described as a loophole, something designed to satisfy antitrust concerns and give collectors something to hold without actually being what people picture when they hear physical copy. A source close to the situation told them directly, at this point in time, there are no plans and that there will be no disc printed, not at launch or afterward. Now, if we zoom out for a second, this isn't just a GTA 6 problem. This is pretty much where the entire industry is heading. So Sony recently reported that 85% of PlayStation game sales in the fourth quarter of 2025 were digital, and that is a record high. So, something like that, and Take-Two themselves are also pulling something like 97% of their total revenue through digital channels at this point. So when you do look at it at that way, Rockstar going all digital with their biggest release ever isn't really some shocking outlier decision. It's basically just following the trend the entire industry has been building toward for years. And there's also a pretty interesting financial angle that doesn't get talked about enough either. As long as cheap secondhand physical copies exist, publishers don't control the price floor. So what that means is people can just always wait and grab a used copy for less by skipping physical media entirely. Rockstar and the platforms own the entire pricing curve. They control how long the price stays high, how slowly it ever gets discounted, and they completely sidestep the used game market. For a company like Take-Two as well, that is a pretty significant amount of control over revenues for years after launch. Now, let's go ahead and get into the other big controversy, which might be even more frustrating to fans than the disc situation, and that is the standard versus ultimate edition split. So every big release, usually has these days some kind of premium tier, usually early access, a few cosmetic skins, maybe a digital soundtrack, nothing too crazy, but Rockstar went all in here. So we're basically talking about a bunch of actual in-game content, specifically which is locked behind the Ultimate Edition. We're talking, unique stores, we're talking about exclusive vehicles, weapons, even certain shops and services that only Ultimate Edition owners get access to. People have counted at least 16 separate exclusive unlocks are gated behind that higher price tier. And look, if it was just a cosmetic skin or some throwaway outfit, most fans probably wouldn't even care that much. But locking actual gameplay content, stores and items behind a higher price point is the kind of thing that does cross the line for a lot of people. It feels like a bonus edition and more like the base game is intentionally incomplete unless you pay extra. So industry analysts have pretty much weighed in on all of this as well, and the consensus is pretty much kind of bleak. If you're hoping backlash will change anything, most of them are saying flat out that anger online rarely translates into lost sales. For a game this anticipated, people will complain about the price, complain about the lack of a disc, or complain about just Ultimate Edition content being locked away, and then turn around and then pretty much just pre-order anyway. So given how massive the pre-order numbers are already looking, it doesn't really seem that Rockstar is going to care or actually do anything. And this is also shaping up to be one of the biggest launches in gaming history, possibly the biggest one ever, regardless of any of these controversies. So there's one silver lining worth mentioning, though, and that is pretty much that multiple sources have speculated that even if there is no standard disc, Rockstar could release some kind of collector's edition down the line, complete with physical extras like a fold-out map or other collectible items, similar to what we did see in the GTA 5's collector's edition or the RDR2 box set, and that would obviously come at a premium price, but for diehard fans, it might be the only physical option worth waiting for. And so where does that leave us? No, pretty much no traditional disc has been confirmed. An Ultimate Edition that locks real content behind an extra cost, and an entire industry watching to see whether Rockstar's approach becomes the new standard everyone else follows. Now, whether whether you're fine with all of this, or that it's enough to make you reconsider pre-ordering, the bottom line is that GTA 6 is still on track to break records either way. And let me know in the comments where you guys land on all of this. Are you going to be pre-ordering regardless, or are you holding out to see if a real collector's edition shows up later? If you found this breakdown useful, drop a like and subscribe for more GTA 6 coverage as we get closer to release.